been attending recent discussions last few days, which have been very interesting, insightful. 50% of which is at least their credit. Let me just bring out nice points. So, are there any questions?
Before we start, can you hear me? Can anyone hear me?
We can hear you here.
Yes.
So we're having trouble hearing Gurudev.
Oh,
It's very difficult to pick up that amp.
Okay. I guess we're about to
We can,
try.
Aradhana, we can hear you just fine, and we could just hear Madan just fine. But during Kirtan, we could only hear Mridanga and Kartala, and we could only sometimes hear the Kirtan call and response part. But we can't hear Guru Maharaj barely at all. And I've got it on my TV with the speakerphone jack with 50% volume.
Okay.
because so maybe they want to see me.
They are.
Yeah, we are.
I think the computer might be a little too far.
It's
maybe
Yeah, if we could put it
closer.
closer, let's try that.
Or does the camera go both ways?
Switch.
It
Switch
does.
the camera the other way because your microphones are on this side of the computer. So switch the camera and turn the whole computer around, and I think they'll be able to hear much better.
We'll try.
Also, if you could make sure that you're on the English channel,
Yes.
that's important.
Lord Balarama is the presiding deity of Asya, Sakya, and Vatsalya, and who's the presiding deity of the kamarupa path.
Mhm. Mhm. So the question is about the fact, as we discussed the other day, that what's referred to by Rupa Goswami as sambandha-rupa bhakti. Sambandha-rupa bhakti, the term sambandha, it means relationship. So there are parshadas, eternal associates of Krishna in his Vraja-bhakti, who have a relationship with him as friends, as elders, or as servants, for example, in the family of Nanda Maharaj, who's the king of the cowherds. So Sakyarasa, Vatsalyarasa, and Dasirasa. The reason that these three, can you hear me?
There's like a big echo and I'm trying to figure out where that's coming from.
It's because we're going through a mic through the speaker, and that's picking up that.
I think it's because we're going through a mic and a speaker. And it's picking up on that.
You're not speaking
Yikes,
directly.
okay.
Normally you're speaking directly into
Right.
headphones into the computer. So this
So I'm
is
speaking into a speaker, and the speaker is speaking to your speaker.
Yeah, I really can't hear because I'm hearing everything come back.
Well,
I hear nicely.
With
We hear Guru Maharaj nicely
with no echo.
okay.
with no echo.
Good. So I'll continue. The reason that these relationships with Krishna are called sambandha, the form of sambandha-rupa. Sambandha-rupa means form. So that the is because these are relationships in Braj that are known, acceptable, to be a friend of Krishna, to be an elder of Krishna, to be a servitor of Krishna. So they're called sambandha. Whereas the other division of Rag Bhakti, which is called kamarupa bhakti, refers to the gopis young gopis, adolescent gopis' love for Krishna. And that is a relationship too, but it's not allowed in the context of the Leela setting. It's kind of off the map. So it's called kamarupa. It's rising out of kama. Kama means desire. It means lust. I mean, you have to look at this externally. Obviously, this is all pure praying, but it takes an appearance of what would be lust otherwise. So the gopis meeting with Krishna is unbecoming in the context of the setting, which makes it more intense and so on and so forth. So it's arising not out of an acceptable relationship, but just out of kama. So it's called kamarupa. Now the means to attain sambandha-rupa, either in dasya, sakti, or vatsalya, or sambandha-rupa or kamarupa, are respectively the paths of sambandha-rupa and kamarupa. Anuga means to follow. Just to clarify, so the question is regarding the fact that Balarama, whose bhava is called sankul, which means like packaged or grouped. So he is in Sakyarasa, which is the dominant sentiment that defines him, but it's packaged together with dasya and vatsalya, all three of them. So he's defined by Sakya, but sometimes he'll find the bhavas and examples of him relating with Krishna as an elder, or as a servitor. We find that at the end, for example, of the Brahma Vimohan Leela, where he realizes something's going on here. It's very incredible what Krishna's done. And Brahma's been bewildered by it. I've even been bewildered by it. I want to speak of Brahma Vimohan, it's Balarama Vimohan. When Krishna showed himself to do all the calves and all the cowherd boys and so on, so it's a long story, of course. So there he expresses dasya. So we find examples in the Bhagavatam of Balarama expressing himself in each of these, while overriding and predominantly is the friend of Krishna. So it's called Sankubha. So there are other cowherd friends of Krishna who have Sakyarasa, and it's packaged together with Dasya, their younger friends. There are older friends who have their Sakya packaged together with Vatsalya, like an older brother. Their friends who just have purely Sakya. And then there's the unique group of the Narmasakas who aren't in Sankul Bhav, they're in Sakya Bhav, but it's a particular kind of Sakya Bhav that's influenced in a different way by Madhurya Rasa, because in Sankul Bhav, the Dasya or the Vatsalya, in case of, let's say, Balarama or other friends who have the Sankul Bhav, the Dasya and the Sakya, the Dasya and the Vatsalya are not mixing with the Sakya Bhav. They're experienced separately unto themselves. Well, Dasya-bhakti, Dasya-bhav has a neutral relationship with Sakya, but Vatsalya has a incompatible relationship with Sakya. So if Sakya become, if Vatsalya becomes prominent, then the Sakya will recede to the background. Because Sakya means equality. Equality. But Vatsalya is not about equality. Vatsalya means parental love. So we don't think of our children as our equals, and they don't think of us as equals. But equality is central to Sakya rasa. So the Vatsalya will compromise that, cause it to contract the Sakya. And similarly, although Dasya is neutral, it's not going to add anything to the Sakya. And so these, and there are many examples of Samkul Bhav. Also, Uddhava is in Samkul Bhav. He's a Dasya Bhakt, but he has some influence of Sakya when he comes to Vrindavan to deliver a message to the inhabitants on behalf of Krishna. Then his Sakya comes to the foreground. He experiences things like pranay, for example. So there are many examples. Yudhisthira Maharaj is a combination of what Sakya and Vatsalya. So, but with regard to the Narmasakas, they're not in Samkul Bhav. Typically, Madhurya rasa is not packaged together with another rasa in Samkul Bhav, but there's a mixing of rasas that's possible when they're compatible. So Sakya rasa and Madhurya rasa are compatible, unlike Sakya rasa and Dasya, Sakya rasa and Vatsalya. So when a devotee has a particular rasa, but they become attracted to another compatible rasa, that compatible rasa will mix and nourish and take to new heights their dominant rasa. So a friend of Krishna who is attracted to the fact that Krishna is attracted to the gopis, that does something to him, and is sympathetic to that, and interested in that, has empathetic feelings for Krishna, can feel not only separation from Krishna himself, but can feel Krishna's separation from the gopis through empathetic, I want to say, connection, emotional connection. So they see that, of course, we're talking about it with time, but it's an eternal bhav, but they see that Krishna is attracted to the gopis. So they want to associate themselves with the gopis to understand what that's about. So they have a group leader in Sakya rasa, and they have a group leader in Madhurya rasa also. And they don't love Krishna romantically, but they love Krishna's romantic life by way of wanting to participate in it, assist in it, and so forth. And so this takes their Sakya Bhav to new heights because the Madhurya rasa is now nourishing it. It's something like if you have yogurt, nice, very nice. Now if you add a little honey, very, very nice. So the mixing is like that. Put a drop of honey in, and it's still yogurt, but it's sweeter. So the purpose then of the rasa that is not one's own, but one is attracted to, that rasa's purpose is to nourish in the case of the sakhas, their friendly love. So we find that it reaches to levels of mahabhav that are typically only experienced by the gopis. And therefore they're classified as Jantika Bhav, or as Rasagya. They know about all the dealings of Radha and Krishna, they participate in them. I cited this last night, I think, the special position of Subal as stated by Rupa Manjari. speaking to another Saki, wanting to inspire her to love Subal because he's so special. In the love affairs between Radha and Krishna, when they're experiencing Mon, Radha's upset with Krishna. No one is more capable of mitigating the Mon, which is everyone's desire, than Subal. This is a specialty of his, for example. So these are intimate players. These friends are intimate players in the romantic life of Radha and Krishna. They are friends with Krishna, and in the case of Subal, for example, they have a servant relationship with Radharani. Servant, but they're friends, but it's more like a king guard, like a servant. So when they're with Krishna, and the gopis, they'll take the side of Krishna. When they're with the gopis, when they're with just Krishna, the gopis out there, they'll take the side of their gopi group leader, plead her case, for example. So the interesting thing about this peculiar expression of form of Sakya Bhav is that while there are other examples of a devotee in a particular rasa being attracted to another rasa, and that other rasa mixing and augmenting and nourishing their rasa, this typically occurs only temporarily. So it acts, that other rasa, like a sanchari. Sanchari means like moving. So there are sanchari bhavs are, you have in rasa, one is defined by a particular bhava, sakya, fraternal, parental, romantic, right? And then there are other bhavas in the context of that come and go. So one can be in romantic love with Krishna, and other emotional feelings will come and go. Well, you're always romantically in love. Sometimes you'll be pleased with him, sometimes you'll be displeased. Does he love me? Does he not? And so on, and so on and so forth. Rupa Goswami lists maybe 33 sanchari bhavs. So they come and they go. When they come and augment this daya bhava and all the other bhavas, that's what we call rasa. It's complicated, but the point I'm making is that typically, when one is in a particular rasa and another rasa that is favorable mixes with it to nourish it, it's temporary. It comes and goes. But with regard to the Narma sakhas, they're defined by that influence. And there isn't a moment in Krishna's life where Radha is not on his mind. Even something else maybe more in the fore, that's in the back of his mind. It's there. Right? We gave an example earlier. He's playing in the forest with his friends, and then the forest starts to remind him of Radha. So he brings it out. Right? So as you can say this, as much as Krishna, his mind goes to romanticism and the thought of meeting with the gopis, is as much as these sakhas are influenced by Madhurya Rasa. There's an example in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu where Subal is with Krishna. And Prabhupada cites this example in Nectar of Devotion. And he gives a setting to it at night during the Rasa Leela. Subal's out there. There are occasions like that. And so one new gopi comes and Krishna says, "What are you doing here? What kind of boy do you think I am? What are you expecting?" And Subal's just cracking up. So it's an example, Rupa Goswami says, of Subal, who is in Sakya Rasa, mixing with Hasya. And so you might say, well, here's an example of Subal. He's in Sakya-rasa. There's some mixing with Hasya-rasa, but there's no Madhurya-rasa. But Jiva Goswami comments, but of course Madhurya-rasa is also there at the same time. So we have no instance, no example of it not being, it may come to the fore, as it does in Krishna's life, in instances, and received in the background to some extent. But again, these particular sakhas are defined by that influence of Madhurya Rasa. So this has been a broad answer to the question. The question is that there's sambandha-rupa bhakti and there's kamarupa bhakti. If Balaram presides over Sakya, Dasya, and Vatsalya, he does. There's another, I should have mentioned, there's another sense in which he's the presiding deity of Hasya Rasa also, joking rasa. That's in a different sense. But over sambandha-rupa bhakti in Braj, he presides, and all those bhavas are part of his constitution, if you will. So the question is, well, and there's kamarupa bhakti, who's presiding over that? That was the question. Simple answer I could have given, I suppose, but play it out a little bit. So we will look at Radha in that way. The next question. Yes.
So it's kind of related to this. So presiding deities, I think I've heard also over sandhini, samvit, hladini.
Yeah.
Is there some correlation here, or is that just separate?
There are different statements. I don't think I can really cite anything. It's scriptural citation, but in the discourse of different charges over time, you can find Balaram presiding over Sandhini Shakti. There's more evidence that you could give in support of that. He is described in the Kasur Lila as the what are they called when you weave the warp and the weft of everything. So nothing's outside of him. He expands the Dham. And then in his expansions of himself as the Purushas, Mahavishnu, Shiradaksh, Karnak, and Garbhadaksha, Shiradaksh, expands the world, this realm. So he presides over the Sandhini Shakti, which is the existential Shakti component, or I should say component of the Swarup Shakti. It has Sandhini, Samvit, Hladini. And you come to Samvit, Sandhini is existential, let's say existence, cognizance, and ecstasy. Sandhini, Samvit, Hladini. So some will say that Krishna, Vasudeva Sarvamiti, it presides over Samvit. Others will say Yogamaya presides over Samvit. The ultimate knowledge is forgetfulness of Krishna. Kind of unknowing that I mean to say forgetfulness of his godhood, that there can be intimacy. So Yogamaya presides internally in a lila, you could say, over the samvit, which is a kind of knowing. You may say, by it I know that I'm the friend of Krishna, but I don't know that he's God. That doesn't, I can't know that if I want to have an intimate relationship with him. So sometimes she's described in that way. And Radha is described as presiding over hladini-sakti. You had a question, similar. What was it? Two questions.
Yeah, you touched on it, but the nature of the relationship between the sakhas and the sandhinis.
What's the nature of the relationship between Krishna's friends, boyfriends, and Krishna's girlfriends? Right? Well, most of the boyfriends of Krishna have sisters. So, and Krishna finds out about them, through his friends. That's why in Poganda, which is boyhood, when it comes to its middle section, it goes from childhood, Kumar, to Poganda, boyhood. And there are divisions, Adi, Madhya, Antya, you could say, or Sage, beginning, middle, and end of the Poganda, and the Kishore and the Kumar. So in the middle stage of his Poganda, the touch of Kishore starts to enter, because he's totally integrated with his friends now. And so his center of affection is completely moved from being centered on his parents to his friends. It's not that he doesn't love his parents, but you understand the point. And his friends, he knows them very well, so he knows everything about them. They got sisters. He's seen them, and he talks about them to his Narmasakas, who may even report about them, so forth. So that's one way of thinking about most, all the gopis practically have brothers. All the gopas, young gopas, they have sisters. And all those sisters are involved with Krishna's romantic life. They're all in some measure and expression of Radha's love, which he's a composite of, right? Who represents some aspect of her love, personified. But your question is really also about what is the relationship between different devotees? Because everyone's relationship is with Krishna. They love Krishna. But what about with one another? This is a question that comes up in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Krishna's Rupa Goswami's writing about the sthayi bhava, the dominant emotion that defines a devotee as a friend of Krishna, as a lover of Krishna, as a parent of Krishna, an elder, and so forth. And towards the end of that chapter, it appears that a thought comes into his mind, Rupa Goswami. Well, someone may ask, because this whole chapter is about the nature of the sthayi bhava, and that Krishna, it's made clear that Krishna is the object of that love. So everyone's love is centered on Krishna. He's the object of love. They are the vessel of the love. You need both for rasa. You need love, and you need the object of love in which it's reposed, right? So the friends of Krishna are the personification of the love that he is the object of fraternal love for. And so in other rasas, right? You need both. And so Rupa Goswami is making this very clear, and it's as if something comes to his mind. Well, what about, someone may ask, what is the relationship between the different devotees? They all love Krishna, but how do they relate to one another? So he has a verse that in which he describes what he calls suhrit rati. Suhrit rati. Suhrit means friend, so it's love of the friend. And basically, he explains that the love between the devotees is a sanchari bhava, one of those bhavas that accentuates, nourishes the sthayi bhava. So their love for Krishna is nourished by their love and exchange for one another. And he gives an example that pertains largely to Madhurya Rasa. When he says some devotees love Krishna and the friend equally. Some love Krishna more than the friend, And there's one group that loves the friend more than Krishna. And we call that by even another name called the Bhavalas. The ulas of Bhav. And that's very peculiar, he says. The commentators say, Jiva Goswami, Vishwanath, because it results in a reverse. What is the reverse? Well, as I said, the relationship with other devotees is a sanchari bhav that nourishes the sthai bhav. But in Bhavalas, the peculiarity is that the love for Krishna nourishes the love for the devotee has for the friend. So over the centuries, commentators on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, this is a reference to, when you look at it through Madhurya Rasa lens, as the example, in that we're giving, speaks about Manjari Bhav, because they're the Manjari, the maids, handmaidens of Radha. The peculiarity of their love is they love the friend, which is Radha, a little more than Krishna. They love the friend more than Radha, more than Krishna. So their love for Krishna nourishes their love for Radha rather than the other way around. So, well, generally, Surit-rati is called the Sanchari. This is another special name that's been given. This is called Bhavalas. That's very special. So there's a lot of love there. You gotta have a lot of love. Yes.
It's not so much a question, but it really was I have a moment where you were on farm yesterday, and it was a while before I was working at Rajan, and then we started in, but there were steps into the class and some of the things you said before you got to chapter 15, chapter 10, the Bhagavad-gita was, for me, to really hit me about reading the Bhagavad-gita.
Bhagavatam.
Bhagavatam, sorry. Reading it literally in deference to reading it, not figuratively, but in the implied meaning, searching for implied meaning, which you're always doing for us as devotees. Untangling and sort of converting things, like pulling out. It's amazing how you teach. You also talked about what really stayed with me in that passage before we dug into chapter 15 was the metaphysical ego and the material ego. Those
Psychological.
That really, what does this mean? Really? I mean, it sounds wonderful, and I'm not sure really how to think on what you said.
Right. Swami Bhakti is commenting on some things that I said yesterday, kind of by what is part of an introduction to the discussion from the Dinakasura Lila that we entered into. And I guess he's letting me comment on them a little further or something to that effect. The first part being the fact that to read the text of the Bhagavatam and understand what's all that's there is takes more than being able to read or to know Sanskrit. That would help, could help. Rupa Goswami makes a statement at the end of the first chapter of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where he says that in order to effectively engage in Shastra Yukti, one has to have ruchi, a taste. Shastra Yukti means to reason. So there's Keval Yukti. Prabhupada called Keval Yukti. His term for that was mental speculation. No mental speculation, we would say, right? And therefore, the simple explanation was that rather than speculate, what does the scripture say? So he used to say, if in spiritual circles, if you want to make a point, you need to support it from the texts, right? Which is the standard of knowledge. This is basically theology. Now, it used to be in the West that philosophy was tied to revelation, the Western revelation of the Bible, New Testament, I guess. But then at a certain point, philosophy started to unhinge itself from revelation and just be philosophy rather than theology. Theology is, in a sense, philosophizing about revelation and its implications. And so unhinging thinking philosophically from revelation, hey, you're free now to think whatever you want. People come up with all kinds of stuff, all kinds of ideas, existentialism, and the problems that come with it. And so you can just go on and on. Prabhupada compared that to just kind of like masturbating. There's just nothing to come from that. Mental masturbation or something like that. I think one of his cruder ways of explaining the idea. So the mind, the intellect is just free to think whatever. But mind and intellect, from our perspective, are products of our own karma and instruments of bondage. Unto themselves, they can't free us from the bondage. They can be used in relation to revelation and grace to help us transcend their limits. But unto themselves, just thinking, you're not going to, or intellectualizing, you're not going to intellectualize yourself out of material existence. That's not going to happen. Maya's too complicated. You can't. She can't be figured out. That's not possible. Krishna says, Maya me tamtarantite. Vishwanath says he's beating this chest. It says, Mama Maya duratya. You pea brain, don't think you can think your way out of my Maya. That's not possible. It's not happening. But if you surrender to me, it becomes very easy. I can take you. I'm above Maya. I can take you. So by grace and then effort, we have to use our intelligence and body, mind, words, and so forth in relation to grace. It's not for something we stop thinking. No, we have to think alone. We have to tax our intelligence. So one thing is philosophical mental speculation, cable yukti. That won't help us. You might, through cable yukti, come to the conclusion that you're not the body. Kind of a Socratic conclusion, as I understand. I'm not an expert on the Greeks, but I think he said something like, "You want to kill me, but you don't know what I am." So it's possible. Sanatana Goswami concedes in Brihad Bhagavatamrita that there's an argument that he's constructed there between the Bhakti Shastras, the scriptures advocating Bhakti, and the scriptures advocating Gyan, and they're debating, personified. They're debating one another. Gyan is more efficacious than Bhakti. No, Bhakti is more efficacious, and so forth. So at a certain point that the Gyan Shastras say, well, you don't need Bhakti to become self-realized, to realize the Atma. And Sanatana Goswami, well, the book says, okay, you got me. Okay, you don't need Bhakti to become self-realized. And so the Gyanis are, celebrating, right? He lets him celebrate for a minute. And then he says, but self-realization is only the penultimate stage. It's like getting to the 1 yard line in the Super Bowl and not getting in the end zone. How disappointing. Because you might realize through Gyan, I mean, this is, intellect is for discrimination. So the finest expression of discrimination is discriminate between what's out there and who's asking the question. What's out there? And who's asking the question? Is what's out there the same as what's asking the question? Are they different? That's what life's about. This isn't some old stuff, you know, it's dusty, you know, books off the shelf. This is very current for human life at all phases. What's out there and who's asking? Is there a difference between the two? Is there an out there? Is there anything out there? Some say there's nothing out there. Some say there's nothing in there. We have radical non-dual spiritualism. We have radical non-dual materialism. And these are very crude. Very crude. Materialism, naturalism, reductive materialism. This is very like boring. How it's a very nuanced understanding of life. The attempt to just reduce the entirety of emotional life, which is what it's all about, to just matter, just non-experience, to reduce experience to non-experience. And they're having a hard time, you know, doing that. Obviously, it's the hardest part of establishing beyond a doubt materialism or naturalism is, well, we have to deal with consciousness. You say it's the hardest part. It's the whole thing. If you can't reduce consciousness to matter, you don't have anything. You have nothing. You have no philosophy. So you're having a hard time doing it. It's called the hard problem of consciousness. We solve the problem. It's not a hard problem for us. We say, stones don't think their thoughts. We're not Berkeleyan in our idealism to an extreme. Bishop Berkeley, maybe the original Western idealist, you know, if the tree falls in the forest and nobody saw it or heard it, did it happen? Is there anything really out there? And so idealism is the material. So you have, there's only what's out there, there's only what's in there. Very simplistic. The way to Vedanta would be everything's in there, there's nothing out there. It's such a simplistic perspective. That's just the antithesis of materialism. There's no nuance to it. In terms of Vedanta, it's funny because the way to Vedanta presents itself as being for the intellectuals, and Bhakti is for the emotional people who don't have as much up here to think it out. So that's fine too. You'll get somewhere with that. You know. But actually, if you look at it, just look at Gaudiya Vaishnavism, how much more complex it is, how much more introspection and intellect it requires. Like I can speak to an audience and say, okay, you're not the body, and this is why, and you're pursuing enduring happiness in relation to things that don't endure. That's a recipe for disappointment. Whatever you acquire in pursuit of happiness will leave you of its own course, and leave you disappointed as a result. So on and so forth. We can go back and make so many arguments that it's fairly easy to make. But then if on top of that, I have to say, so all these names and forms that the world's made up of. You named it this. So, you just gave it a name, whatever. This is all illusory. This is all here today and gone tomorrow, right? Here it's a house. What was it before? Some wood, some fire, some water, some stone. Of course, it'll be here forever. It's a temple now, but besides that, materially speaking, things are here today and gone tomorrow, right? So you can make this point pretty well. I mean, just thinking about it very superficially, but then if you start to say, but then again, if you want to go further, there are spiritual forms. And there's a name, it's eternal. So this becomes much more complicated. The idea that Advaita is for the less intelligent people. That's my perspective in terms of Vedanta. It's the easier stuff, it's all one. Okay. And then that's our teaching, actually. The extent to which the Upanishads emphasize the Atma is one with Brahman is 101 in Vedanta. That's the beginning course. If you want to know what God is like, what in this world most resembles God? Us. If we are consciousness, as we say. But there's ways in which we're different from God also. But we have to think about this and be told this and try to understand it. And he doesn't, right? So what were we talking about?
The metaphysical plane.
Hmm?
The metaphysical plane, transcendental plane.
Two approaches to false
Yeah,
ego
Kevala
that you
Yukti.
mentioned yesterday.
Shastri.
No, we were talking about
Egos.
Shastra Yukti. Shastra Yukti. A little bit of a tangent there. But materialism, this is a result of, philosophical conception, separating reasoning from revelation. Our idea, theology here is that there's something called Shastra Yukti. While, I was making the point, yeah. So while through Keval Yukti, just let your mind go, you might come up with the conclusion that you're not the body, like Socrates, let's say. And in Vraja-bhakti, Sanatana Goswami concedes it's possible without bhakti. But then he says, but again, where's that? Because to realize the Atma is different than the body is different or related, different than entering into Brahman and actually transcending. For that, to understand, let me give you an example. To understand, to realize that you are an Atma, that you're consciousness, to realize it, end all fear, all anxiety. It's a big thing. I'll give an example. You come out of negative numbers of karma and debt to zero. You have no debt. You don't owe anybody anything. You're complete. To arrive at zero, that in relation to negative numbers gives zero a positive connotation. Right? But what that's like in relation to liberation, mukti, is getting a passport. You've got your passport now. If you want to go into Brahman, you have to be like Brahman. You can't go with your shoes on. You have to take off this dress. It doesn't fit there. That's the world of consciousness. You want to go to the world of consciousness, that's a super subjective world. You can't take the objective world with you. That's just like a shadow. That comes to matter. The objective world comes out of the subjective world. You have to expel some things every now and then. This is material life. So to get a passport to get out, This is self-realization. Atmananda, Atmaram, like Sukadev. He was Atmaram. He was taking pleasure in the Atma. And he had no interest in anything else. How pleasurable is the Atma then, compared to anything else that you could try to acquire and add on, dress yourself up with. The Atma is more beautiful in its nakedness than any dress or attire of samsara that you could possibly put on. The beauty of the Bhagavatam, of course, is that it dams the tide of material emotion. It keeps the material life going on. It undresses the Atma from its, in other words, its material role, and makes it naked, but then it bathes it with rasa. Bathes it with rasa, that it can enter the dance of Krishna. So, in relation to liberation, you need a passport. But what else do you need? You need a visa. That comes from the other side. You can't get the visa from this side. You have to go to the embassy, which is a different country, even though it's there. It's in the United States, but it's not there. You need the visa. So visa comes from the other side. That's bhakti. So it's not the Goswami says it's true. You could come to self-realization by jnana, because jnana is governed by sattva guna, and sattva guna is characterized by knowledge. So the highest knowledge within sattva guna is of what's going on in the world is that you're not money, you're not the body. That's the finest expression of discrimination. But if you should go through all the trouble in jnana to realize that you're an atma, where have you gone? Smart says you've only gone to the penultimate state, and you didn't get liberation, which requires bhakti, as Krishna says in the Gita and Bhagavatam repeatedly. It's there in the text. You need the visa. You need the visa. So he says, so who cares? So you've got self-realization. Okay, we admit you could get self-realization without bhakti, but that's nowhere. The goal is mukti, not just self-realization. Tell that to the self-realization fellowship. No. It's just a term that they've used. I'm sure they're concerned about mukti. So somehow we got onto that. Oh yeah. So mental speculation. Yes. So we, instead of cable yukti, which the best you could come up with is arrive at self-realization, we have shastra yukti. So shastra yukti means to reason about the implications of the scripture. It says this, it means this is what's behind it, this word means that, and so forth. Krishna says at the end of the Gita, those who study my words, inside, outside, upside, downside, all sides, over and over again, and repeat it to the devotees, they're very dear to me, he says. So he said, this is jnana yajna. So another way of talking about it, the sacrifice of knowledge, to use your intellect, to understand my words, what I'm saying, to understand the Bhagavatam. So this is called shastra yukti, but Rupa Goswami says, as I mentioned, Bhagavatam at the end of the first chapter, in order to do this successfully, one needs some taste. So you can hear me do it, but not everybody else can necessarily, or others can do it and land on their feet and say, I think this means this, and I think this means that. And but if they're not grounded enough in the teaching, just philosophically, they may not do it effectively. But if they have taste, then it's like Subal once, when she said to me, said, like, you're fluent in Vaishnavism. Like it's like a just a feeling for this thing, like a language or something. It's true by the grace of my gurus and all of you. You have a feeling for it. So have ruchi, then you can bring out so many meanings and land on your feet and speak about it in ways that haven't been spoken before. So you're interested in that, and the fact that you could sit and read it, and I can read. I can read the translation. It says what it says. He's talking about living in the Bhagavatam. I don't know. It's nice, but then when the sadhu unpacks it, as he said, right, then you think, "Ooh, this bigger than I thought." One word, going on and on and on about one word. Mahaprabhu said every word of Bhagavatam is Krishna. So what was his understanding? When Sanatana Goswami had heard that previously Chaitanya Dev had explained a verse of the Bhagavatam, famous verse called the Atmarama verse, about Sukadev being self-realized, and in spite of being self-realized, becoming attracted to the Bhagavatam. What does he need a book for? When I used to sell books, Prabhupada's books, sometimes people would say, the truth is not in the book. They give one of these profound spiritual responses. The truth's not in the book. There was one. I'd say, that's true. It's beyond the book, but you got to get beyond the book by going through the book. You go through the book to get beyond it. The book is helped meant to take you beyond itself. That is the whole idea of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's actually not a book, right? And the evidence is Sukadev. He became self-realized. He had no ambition, no want, anything. Then he heard these poems from the Bhagavatam, spoken by a woodcutter who was sent by his father, ostensibly to collect firewood, but told him, sing these poems because my son is lost in the forest, self-realized, and I want to let him know there's something more. He heard the poems because his heart was clean like a crystal. They went in, and he had an epiphany. Something got a visa. He got a visa. What good's a passport? You're still in the country. Okay. You need a visa. So through bhakti we get the visa, and yes, I mean, so therefore to hear the Bhagavatam, there are two Bhagavatams. We mentioned this the other night. There are two Bhagavatams: the book Bhagavatam and the person Bhagavatam. Some of my godbrothers and godsisters concluded after Prabhupada departed, and there was confusion as to who to take shelter of, where to get spiritual authority, and some of them came up with the bright idea that just take shelter of the book because there's two Bhagavatams. The Prabhupada, what's the person Bhagavatam, and there's the book Bhagavatam. We got the book Bhagavatam, so Prabhupada's here in the book. We don't need anybody else or anything else. That understanding of the book is evidence that they need a person Bhagavatam still to help them understand the book, because that's not what the book's saying. The book's saying you need both. And when you think you don't, you really do. When you may not, ostensibly or apparently, because you can talk to the people in the book. But if you can't understand what they're saying, you can't land on your feet, so to speak, and explaining it and falling outside of the parameters in very crude ways, even what the Siddhanta is, then it's obvious that you need, to say, for example, as some did, when Prabhupada left, and so there's a spiritual deficit because he was filling such a big hole in our lives. How true, right? So he departed. Now there's a problem. So what should we do? Who could possibly fill the hole? Therefore, let's do away with this Guru Parampara thing, and we'll just keep Prabhupada in the center. Meanwhile, in the Gita, Krishna says, when there's a hole, the solution is Guru Parampara. That's what he says. Evam Parampara Praptam Imam Ragashna. The solution of the problem is the parampara, is the continued succession, not to do away with it. So those are examples of not landing on your feet, right? So we need both Bhagavata. So it's we're humbled in our inability to draw from the text as much as those who have some taste for it can, and we try to stay in their association. That's one comment on one of the points that you liked. Otherwise, the philosophical or the metaphysical ego, false ego, and the psychological false ego. That's an important point I've raised in the past, and it's very much misunderstood in many contemporary spiritual circles, and it results in tremendous amount of psychological abuse in the name of spirituality, where the guru, so-called, will embarrass. I'll give you a good example. There was a popular guru some time back, and he had some charisma and whatnot, some mysticism to him, but in order to one of the things that he would do was invite the couple who were his disciples to come in to see him, and then in order to do away with their ego and their attachments, you'd have sex with the wife in front of the husband. And if you're having a problem with that, it's obviously your ego. You're attached. It's obvious. So this is, do you think that you're going to do away with the ahankar by that? It's to not understand what ahankar is. So it's a good example, but have a healthy psychological ego, that's called sattva, to be balanced. One who's in sattva is in a better position to take advantage of bhakti. Although bhakti will go anywhere, she doesn't depend on that. She may go to into anyone's heart, but those who are in sattva, or to use this example, to have good psychological balance, they're going to be in a better position to take advantage of bhakti. Bhakti is going to cleanse away problems. If they're not there, well, she doesn't have to do that. So that's the whole idea of varnashram. Varnashram is a social religious system. It's supposed to bring people into material psychological balance by engaging them according to the nature of their disposition and so forth in society, associating them with persons of like-mindedness and so forth. The Brahmas would live over here, and that was the idea. So the import of it is that if you have psychological balance, that's sattva, whether you're a Sudra or Vaishya or whatever, and then you're in a better position for vertical growth, if you will. So yeah, it's an important point. Yes.
So I've heard at the end of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's life how he asked Srila Sridhar Swami to sing, even though someone else said no, let him sing because he sings beautifully. And Srila Sridhar Swami may not have, but Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wanted to hear him sing. So along those lines, I know many devotees, especially our second generation, they love kirtan, and they're so good at kirtan and music, and it's very moving. And I also know personally that they don't really follow very strictly, and speakers as well that are great orators. And I know personally they don't really follow strictly, but it's very enlivening sitting in front of them. They're very engaging. And conversely, others that are very strict, they're boring, when they don't sing nicely and they don't speak, can't hold your attention. I find many writers are not good speakers, because maybe they, that's their medium writing. So I just want to know, because you were talking about hearing from the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. So what is that? Is that, okay? And is it, are we still making advancement hearing that if somebody's not following?
Well, I think you'll know if you're making advancement. So you don't have to ask anybody if you're making advancement. If as a result of association, you're inspired to chant yourself and apply yourself in ways that maybe even those speaking are not. Then you've taken some gold from a filthy place, use Prabhupada's analogy. So you have to be kind of artful, skillful in sadhana, and you want to associate in such a way as to make progress. And you have to tell your temperature. Is this helping me? If it is, then it's practical, and you tell your temperature like that. You know, you have to think, am I going for entertainment here? A lot of the kirtan, you know, seen as like entertainment, you know.
And
It's kind
could
of like
it be,
a garage
it's
band.
very pleasing to the mind, like you said, entertainment, but afterwards, like you said, you don't really feel
Yeah, so
that you have
then you may have
increased your spiritual.
then you may have wasted your time, because titillated your intellect, or your, you know, it sounds good, you know, and so it might just, you know, I like the sounds, gives me a uplifting emotional feeling, or it titillates my intellect, or you know, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for something much more than that. So, but you have to.
Yeah, just like when you spoke the first day, I thought, I told my daughter, wow, I really want to pay attention now to the Bhagavatam. You know, I'm not just reading it superficially. And also my japa, I always struggle with japa, but I felt an improvement the next day.
You've taken gold from a filthy place. Good work. Yes.
So these are kind of more mundane questions, but also pertinent, I guess. And it's not to be critical of anyone or any group or anything like that. But at present, my family's kind of suffered a bit psychological threats, monetary threats, for kind of holding accountability for leadership. Let's say another place. So it's kind of hard not to be burned by that. It's very, it's testing, I should say. So my question is, what should we look for leadership? What is the standard for leadership? What is the accountability for leadership? And also, not just institutionally, but also personally. I'm not trying to say like everyone else. It's everyone. I'm also speaking about myself. Also, we can also take the long. You know, we've done so many things in so many lifetimes, but now we're in the present. So those are my two main questions. It's just, what is the standard for leadership? Should be
Leadership in relation to what?
in relation to an institution, like say there's by default
Spiritual institution,
spiritual
political
No,
institution?
spiritual. This is spiritual, not political, at all. And also, what is the proper? These are kind of roadblocks for me that I kind of need to undo and have a proper understanding. And also, what is the proper? These are just very basic questions, but what is the proper healthy guru-disciple relationship?
Well, we've talked for a while, so I don't want to go into too much depth here, but I think that, you know, what is the standard of spiritual authority is your first question. And I think that in one sense, who's a spiritual authority, let's say a guru figure, a sadhu, does have to be well versed in the teachings, you know, to be able to teach them, and acquainted Shabde Pare Nishnatam Brahmani Rupa Shamashvaram. So Bhagavatam answers this question. Shabde Pare Nishnatam says Shabda means the sound, which means revelation, the Upanishads, Gita, the Bhagavad, and so forth. Shabde and Pare. The Bhagavatam is theistic. So here Pare means who has understood the Shabda, was informed about the Shabda from a theistic perspective, rather than from a Gyan perspective. right? Theistic, and Nishnatam. And Nishnatam means upside down, inside out, and so forth, and looking at it from every angle. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, interestingly, comments on the verse and says, and other books too. Not just the Bhagavatam, but other books. So, for example, our authorities who formed our sampradaya, they were familiar with all the philosophical systems of the time. There weren't as many as today, so a little easier, but they were, the 6 darshans, they were familiar with them. And in their commentaries, you could see that they're agreeing with something in the Nyaya philosophy or the Samkhya philosophy, or disagreeing with it, and so on. So, to be an authority, you have to command, what is it called? Adherence, rather than demand. It's not a rule. We say, you must have a guru. But the feeling should be, I must. Not that you must, but I must, because I feel that she is capable of helping me, because it's my experience sitting with her or him. I'm inspired, and those are, I feel like that. I couldn't say it like that, but I feel like that. It's almost like that's what I wanted to say. If I could say it, I would say it like that. I feel I resonate with that. So I must make this connection. It's not like a law. So the guru figure, or the spiritual authority, in this way commands respect. And if they demand it, what can I do? If someone has faith in what I say, then we're okay, we agree. So let's get together. If you don't, well then, you got to follow your faith. Faith is something that is not our doorstep where we wipe our feet. It's where we bow our head to. So, or we defer to. Shraddhayam Purusha, says the person is their faith. So sometimes, we may be in a situation where some guru figure or spiritual authority is demanding adherence to what? I mean, there may be some where she insists, use this, you should follow. But what is that? That should be like, because this is what the Bhagavatam says, this is what the Gita says, that we're teaching about bhakti, okay? Another thing is, you may have an institution, which is you bring up. Now, an institution brings in a whole other dimension. An institution needs this, the institution wants that, the institution wants you to do this and do that, and so on and so forth. And that's not essential to your bhakti. Now, someone may thrive in that situation and want to do whatever the institution, needs, and so on and so forth, and someone else may not, because it has a, well, there could be any number of reasons, but take, for example, my god sister Jamuna and Dinatarne. They went outside of ISKCON because the institution wasn't working for them in terms of being able to serve it. And what did Prabhupada say? They were in Oregon, story goes, and then Prabhupada said, tell them to come to Los Angeles. And they couldn't come for different reasons and so forth. So Prabhupada went there. And all his close disciples there would say, Prabhupada can't go there. He's here with all of us. There's 2 devotees and they're not even in the mission. They're outside. But I think Prabhupada went there. And there are other examples where Prabhupada would say, if you can't serve in ISKCON, which was an institution, then you can serve outside. The point is to serve Krishna, to hear, chant, and so on and so forth, to do Navalakshan Bhakti. hearing, chanting, remembering about Krishna, serving the deity, and so on and so forth. So the primary business of the guru is to engage us in bhakti. And if he or she has a mission and other things to do and so on and so forth, then opportunity to engage in those things may be there as well. And but there's some relativity to that. So I might ask somebody to do something and they may say, I would love to do that, Guru Maharaj, but you know, I say, I want you to take this to San Francisco this morning. So I'd love to do that. Or like, I was up all night editing the book and I'd probably fall asleep at the wheel. I don't say, I'm your guru, I want you to do that. I say, okay, we'll get somebody else to do that. We'll work around it. So there's some relativity there. And there should be some flexibility on the part of a spiritual authority to make adjustments and so on and so forth. Where other things, there may be some demand. This is what bhakti is. No, it's not that in that sense. So, the guru has to command the spiritual authority, our affection, and draw out of us a desire to serve. And he or she has to have good character, example, that we can see that what they teach, they're exemplifying, and if not, you choose your authority. It's up to you. I mean, I can give you these parameters. Then you make your choice. If you choose to think that somebody's not authority because other people think that person is, you don't have to go with the group think there. If people threaten you, I don't know what you're talking about. It sounds pretty serious.
It's just been it's more of like the leadership commits abuse, I'm saying, and then the disciples
Oh, I
are
know.
now
I see.
attacking the defender, I guess you would say. It's kind of more of my question. Is more of that. It's sometimes the followers are okaying the bad behavior and then kind of attack anyone who criticizes the leader.
Yeah, it's probably better not to get involved in it.
Yes.
It's not, it's not in your orbit.
Right.
It's in a broader sense. You're aware of it. I think I know what you're talking about. I heard about this morning from somebody in another group, but there's overflow. Take your stand, and it'd be well reasoned. And what was the other question?
That was pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah, you answered it. Thank you.
Okay, so, all right. Nice to be with all of you. Sri Krishna Balarama ki jai. Vraja-bhakti ki jai. Lord Bhakti ki jai. Lord Premanand.
Swami Maharaj ki jai.